everyone. It's 11 o'clock. Thanks for joining us. You have come into the home of Festivals Helping Festivals. For those of you who have not joined us before, this is being recorded, just so that we can share this with other people in the industry. So again, this is your roundtable. It is a roundtable. Today we're talking about site management. And we really need you to jump in with your questions, your challenges, your wisdom, so that we can all learn from each other. I am your face host. Jay is your production person in the background. And we have Marnie Lapierre, who's co-hosting this with me. So thanks again, everyone. And today is site management. So is there any burning questions? Marnie, you might want to unmute yourself so that you can be there for people. So are there any burning questions, or do you just want us to give an overview of site management and we'll move on from there? Okay, Marnie, why don't you go ahead and just sort of give an overview of site management? I did send you all an email on that, but why don't you go for it?
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to sit in and, lend a hand via your organization or festival to the rest of us. This is the purpose of this is that we're sharing information. Sometimes, it's nice to know we're not alone in the planning processes. And it is very surprising that we all share sometimes the same issues, whether you're a small little event or a major festival. Yeah, it's sometimes, we do go through the same kind of obstacle course. So one of the things that we thought that would be good to address is site management and how it's changing, what successes you've had in circumventing the obstacles that are set in your path for an event, and addressing the changes that are kind of mandatory now because of the way things are going regarding the pandemic, and just even supplier chain issues. So we picked out of a plethora of topics that apply to site management. We narrowed it down to 4, and of the 4 that we picked is waste management, which aligns with the site management. Signage and accessibility, adhering to the AODA rules, and even risk assessment, which kind of all goes in together. I mean, there's so much, as we all know, that applies to site management that it's kind of hard to fit all those little topics into 1 hour. So we kind of guesstimated that these might be some of the top burning issues. We might be wrong. You are the group that has come forward today. Maybe you've got more to share, or maybe a question that we all as a group can help answer, or if not, track down the answers. So I thought maybe because of the 4 topics, we could start with a risk assessment, which will kind of lead into the other 3. And risk assessment is it is a very vast portion of site management, but it's a great way to start. And I thought, from my perspective, I could bring forward a little anecdote of something that happened a few years back at one of our very large events up here in Northern Ontario, where the access and egress needed to be addressed 2 days into this long-term event. And it was an interesting challenge because it was expected there would be 18 to 20,000 people. We very nearly had that. And there was 1 point of access and 1 point of egress, like all together. And I had brought this concern up to our committee. And it was in day 2 that the security team realized that this would be an issue. So we all met and changed a bit of the layout because it was chain linked fenced all around, so that there was an egress should there be an emergency to the right of the stage, we changed how the linked fences were attached so that in case of emergency, they could be quickly taken down, and 2 points of exit were now maintained. Granted, the entrance, and which was also the exit to the site originally, was fairly wide, but should you have emergency vehicles or a crowd rush, wanting to avoid any issues. So that was a risk assessment that had been identified. Sometimes you get overruled. I just thought I would start the ball rolling. Maybe somebody else has something to jump in with regarding risk assessments and what you've been finding as you're planning now in these times. Any differences or any successes? Would love to hear from you. So does anybody would like to jump in?
And maybe how would you handle a solution like that? Or what would your solution be on handling that?
I think we have a shy bunch this morning.
I'll jump in here. I'm Michelle. I'm from the Rockton Agricultural Society, and I am new in this role. So I have not even experienced our World's Fair yet, and I'm running off of previous risk management plans. Risk management is also my history. I've done emergency management, and I've taught risk assessment at Mohawk. So I'm okay with that. But going through their plans and learning this and learning the property first is going to be kind of a challenge for me. And how it's been done in the past. So that's my challenge right now is getting familiar with properties and rural areas.
So with your event in Rockton, was there a team prior that was addressing that, or is this something new that your event is now kind of reviewing? And since you've done risk assessment, are putting all their hope with you, with your expertise?
I think it's one of those things that it's always just been done type of process. And again, with no fair for 2 years, it's a perfect time to reassess everything. So I've, going to a lot back to, I'm the only staff member now. There's no previous staff history person to rely on. But there's tons of members and tons of volunteers that have all got information. So sorting through those type of things and weeding through those type of things where, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I think, in the end, we'll be able to take what we have existing and just update it, and learning, I guess, bringing up to what I think should be a level of risk management, and where I see things like I just walk around the fairgrounds now. I'm like, oh my God, we got to fix this. We got to do this. We got to do that. And everybody's like, nah, it's fine that way. It's fine. We've always done it like that. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So again, it's just, slowly bringing people around to, okay, what happens if this happens, if this person gets hurt with this, or this happens, how are you going to handle it? I'm like, I don't know. So I'm like, okay, now we're at a point where we can start building a plan. So it's just taking a lot of things that they've just always done and updating it.
Yeah, I've definitely encountered that myself. I've taken over an organization up north, and it's been running for 50 years, and they've always done it that way. They won't be after I'm done with them. Cheryl, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, I'm from the Paris Agricultural Society. So, and I'm similar to both of you in that I assumed this management position 5 years ago. And of course, at one point said, if I hear the words, we've always done it that way again, I'm going to scream that And I have screamed several times. But anyways, after 5 years, I finally hit what I think is a home run. I'm hoping it is, as far as site logistics go. And back to your original scenario. So what we had is that we had a mixture, and again, my background is in insurance and risk management. So I just got the heebie-jeebies every time we mixed pedestrian and automobile traffic. So what we're doing this year is we have a spot along one of our fence lines that had the curb from the street cut out 20 years ago. When they redid the road, somebody in their wisdom had planned for a possible additional entrance or exit off of our grounds, but nobody had taken advantage of it. So I applied to the county this year. And again, this is one of your obstacles, right? When you try to do the site logistics, it's not just all about you, unfortunately, right? So I gave all the information, and the county has given us permission to put a rolling gate in at that one area. And what we're doing this year as a trial is we're bringing our demolition derby cars. So just one small part of our overall entertainment. We're using that entrance and exit. And we're going to use that for a trial, as I said, to see if that works smoothly. Then next year, hopefully what we'll do is bring another portion of our entertainment, which is our livestock trucks. And again, in and out through that gateway, so that we are not having people and all those entertainment vehicles coming up through the same entrance. And at the same time, and this is a huge selling feature, as anybody that in risk management knows, to always be talking safety, safety, safety to any municipal authorities, and it gets their attention right away. And I just clearly said that it will be far safer for us to have vehicles only through that. Plus, in the event of an emergency, now we have one more exit available. If we had to use it, we have a gate there instead of just a solid fence line. So it does take some time and a little bit of tact when you're, of course, approaching the authorities asking for the permissions. But yeah, like I said, it's taken me 5 years, but I'm pretty excited about it. Pray for me that it works.
I completely understand that. It is almost like change management and helping to redirect the thought process with the different partnerships that you have when you're using a venue, and needing those changes to make sure that they're safe. And the education component alone, right across the board with the volunteers, the staff that work the site, the staff that are with the festival or event, is it can be very onerous, but in the long run, when you've got that plan laid out, it does work. And your safety is that I don't know, I term myself as a eternal pessimist, because if I can avoid the negative situation by planning for it and looking at it with a negative view and then fixing it, I think that helps a little bit with circumventing what potentially could be an issue and making the change over time. Is there anybody else that has a little bit to contribute to this particular part of the risk management or questions?
I have something to share. I don't know if my hand is up. Oh, yes. Hello.
Hi, Kelsey.
Hi. My name is Kelsey Walker. I'm the site director for Riverfest Elora in Elora, Ontario. Our festival is about 7,000 to 8,000 people a day at a park in town, and we're at the end of August, so there's typically at least once a weekend a major weather event that blows through, sometimes multiple. So actually I'm quite proud of the risk management approach that we have developed as a team, which is actually based on Hillside Festival's approach, which we're also kind of a part of. This is specific to weather, so it's a little different if there was more of a sort of security concern. But last year, 2019, we had quite a significant storm blow through, unfortunately, right before our headliner on Sunday night. And our approach was to gather all the decision makers into the site office, tech director, security director, site director, myself, artistic director, anyone else that is involved in making decisions. And we had a very clear outline of once lightning strikes within a certain radius, which was determined by our tech director, the stage is paused. If it reaches a certain distance, winds reach a certain speed, the stage is lowered. At a certain further point, evacuation happens. So luckily we didn't have to get to evacuation in 2019. We were sort of able to weather the storm, and people hung out in tents and had a great time while we raced around in the pouring rain, tying down 10 by 10 tents and making sure that everyone was safe. But we also incorporated with our fencing crew a series of, they call them crash fencing. So they're not labeled as exits, but they're easy to remove if necessary. So we haven't actually tested out having to use that, but that's sort of our next approach, is to work with volunteers and security to just double, triple check that everyone knows where these emergency exits are, and we can direct the flow into that area. So luckily we haven't had to get that far, but that's definitely on our list of ensuring for this year's festival that everyone knows what they should do if we get to that point.
Interesting. Did you have that when you all met as the directors to make the decision? Did you already have that plan in effect, that this is what would take place, that you would go in, meet, and the ultimate decision done there? Or was that, oh my good, and it can happen that way. I've been part of events where it's like, oh my gosh, we all need to meet now, and we don't have the plan. And like, was that a result of it, or it was already done?
It was kind of both. So it's kind of based on years of history of getting kind of close to potentially an emergency weather situation and going, oh my God, everyone get here right now. Plus, it was also our technical company that we hired to do our technical production. They have their own standards that they abide by. So we, as a team, defer to their standards first, which is their corporate policy for, I think it's lightning within maybe 10 or 7 kilometers, something like that. And then we based our safety plan off of theirs. So we hadn't had to really use it until 2019. Luckily, and that kind of was a good test for us, and a good reminder that these things can happen. So there's a bit of both, and we're tweaking it all the time.
Definitely. It's a good reminder to all of us to revisit that. We hope for that great weather when we have outdoor events, that, you pray, you do whatever you have to do to make sure the gods are aligned, but, it still has to be in effect. And that's a really good, sticky note to put to dust off those plans and review, because standards can change, and sometimes that information doesn't trickle down to an event organizer. So it's a good opportunity now, prior to the hopeful, wonderful onslaught of all the events happening this year. Crossing fingers, knocking on wood. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. Does anybody have any questions for Kelsey or would like to contribute?
I can ask questions, like maybe I can not point out, but ask questions like, Tina, what would you do for like the Winter Festival of Lights? Because yours was spread out over such a wide property, and how would you have handled, or how do you handle things like that? Yep, okay.
Each of our displays actually have different plans in place. So if there was a display that is something that, for example, the very large deer, and again, they're owned by Niagara false tourism, but our teams would make sure that they're secured so that the wind doesn't knock them down. So some of them have counterweights, some of them have guide wires, but in the case where the wind is significant, where they would have to bring them down, the teams would go out there and take them down. We get some crazy wind across the parkway, like 90 kilometers an hour gusts. So, but a lot of our stuff is already planning for that. Like some of them have 500 pound concrete counterweights. So they've already been like secure in that location. Our volunteers, if it's too windy down in Dufferin Islands, we'll close up because the wind becomes too dangerous, where we could have the trees come. And we're constantly watching it, and it depends which way it's coming. The wind is a huge factor for all our events. We also have policies put in place for the fireworks. So if we have wind coming from the west and everything, it's okay. But the second it changes to the east, we can only, it's like something like under 14 kilometers or under 6 kilometers. I can't remember. I don't have it in front of me, but the show would be canceled. Whereas we could handle it a lot greater the other way. I apologize. I had kind of come in just a little bit late.
Thanks.
Oh, good.
Oh, I can't hear you.
You good? Can you hear me now?
That's all. We've had issues up in Timmins with our fireworks too, when we decided to change locations to host that 8-day festival and the fireworks over the berm. And it was an international fireworks competition that got cut very short because the winds would pick up as soon as the weather cooled down in the evening. And it raised a few concerns, most definitely, when you're launching over a park and the winds are coming and pushing that the embers off towards the housing that's in behind. It's my hat is off to the safety management of any fireworks team that I have ever had the pleasure of working with. What a risk, but amazing shows that go on. And yeah, there's so much to consider in setting up the safety plan for that from A to Z. It's amazing. And I see, Kyle, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to add was planning a street festival a few years ago. One solution we put in place was having pre-recorded evacuation announcements. Since we had multiple stages going down a street, that was really the best point of information, especially, because it was at the base of a Great Lake. Weather could come in very quickly. So having something like that, just that it's pre-recorded, it can play at each of the stages, just letting people know to seek shelter. There were many businesses and places nearby that people could seek shelter if something was coming in quickly, but it was just getting that information and letting people know to take action quickly. And then there was multiple side streets they could go down.
That's a fantastic idea, especially if you have, like you say, a broad event, like a broad venue, in order to get that word out. And working with the team like that really is a great way to translate transmit the information. I like that idea. Tina.
Thanks, Kyle.
And like Kyle, we have a ready to go kind of a plan when the winds are high for the fireworks. So we also include sending that out to the stakeholders who would all be a part of that, so that they can send it out as well, because the winds could change even just from the falls. They can change within 10 minutes and a couple minutes. So it could be all a go, and literally partway through the show could actually stop. So having that communication line to inform everyone in the industry so that they can send that out as well on our behalf, because reaching everyone that's the difficult part when it's something that's right in the midst of happening.
Definitely.
So, you know, because you talked about Kyle, I'm jumping in here, Marnie, sorry. Because Kyle was talking about street festivals, Mira had a question, sent a question in for us, and I'll read it out and please jump in and answer. Would love to know what other festivals on public streets do in terms of barriers for public safety and typical layout of event space when on Main Street. For example, do you group all food vendors together in one area, or are they spread out with other vendors? Do you have all major activities around each other, or more spread out, stage, beer gardens, kid fun zone, etc.? So, your words of wisdom. Thanks, Rob.
Hey folks, I just I thought I'd weigh in because it's really interesting. We're just on the edge of just completing our sorry, I got my camera here. Completing a big festival in our little town of Perth, Ontario, and it was a bit new in how they changed the street-based festival, mostly with spot like booths and whatnot that are in the town. Usually, we always had all these booths lined up along the downtown, side by side, really tightly packed. Right up against the sidewalks and on one main street. And this year, through a little bit of discussions about COVID, also some local businesses saying, hey, we'd like to see a little bit more space between these so people can see our businesses, our downtown businesses. And then we'd like to see it on one of the other side streets where the downtown businesses are. They spread them out. I was at a booth all day on Saturday, and I saw the value of having that spread out. And seeing a lot more space between vendors, a lot more space between musical, we had some musical concerts, some performers, street performers and whatnot, and it actually allowed for a much more comfortable flow and probably a lot more vendor engagement as well. And then on top of that, and something that we struggle with in our little town is a bit of competition between the objectives of a festival, which is often to bring new and exciting things and entertainment and shopping experiences to visitors and locals. And those are the objectives of the downtown businesses or local businesses that are trying to, leverage those activities to gain some market share and show off their own business, their brick and mortar businesses as well. So this was actually a very interesting, and we're doing a bit of an after action review on it. It was a Chamber of Commerce event. And we're doing a bit of an after action discussion on how well did that actually support those local businesses. And anecdotally, we talked to them and they're like, hey, I got a lot more foot traffic. People were allowed to weave in and out of these vendors. The moving around of music entertainment really allowed for people to shift and adjust how they were interacting with people downtown. So, I think a happy accident talking about COVID and saying we need to separate a little bit more, but also showed a bit more of an economic improvement, prosperity improvement with the downtown and relationship as well. And it was really positive at the end. So street festivals are interesting. I know we do that with our big festival as well. It's in a downtown park, and it tends to draw a lot of people away from the downtown, but we're trying to work on ways to try to interact with the downtown businesses and make it a really positive thing for everybody. Because to be honest, I think it even ties to sponsorship for festivals who draw on sponsorship from local businesses. If they see a return on their investment by seeing those people coming to the town, coming back later on as well, they may also look at supporting that festival a lot more by either through monetary contributions or in-kind contributions as well. So a lot to kind of unpack there, but certainly I think that's a great question, and I think it's a very interesting thing, especially for a lot of little towns that are 5,000-6,000 in population, and then see an influx of 20,000 to 30,000 people come in for a festival, and there's a really interesting balance you can strike there, and so that everybody gains. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for sharing that, Rob. That was really interesting to hear because I've experienced maybe in the north, because that's where I see most of our festivals, where the food vendors are all grouped together, and then the marketplace, is all put together with, by type of what they're selling, the homemade items, and then maybe the more corporate style exhibitors and what have you. But having it spread out and mixed like that, that definitely makes to have the foot traffic a little bit more varied and it's supporting the downtown like that. Thank you for sharing that. And I see Kyle. Hi.
I just wanted to ask a quick question for Rob, and like the challenges that you were having with the downtown businesses getting the equal market share. I'm wondering if the businesses, had maybe been encouraged to do basically like an extended patio or something in front of their businesses, so they're essentially placing in a market stall, like what could be a vendor, but is actually extending their footprint and helping you fill in that street vendor space. I'm wondering if that happened at all, or if it was kind of vendors being placed in front of businesses.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kyle. And actually, it is actually what happened. And it actually spurred on the change. A lot of those downtown businesses said, hey, you're parking a vendor right in front of my shop that is either, is going to draw a crowd away or kind of disadvantages to me. And the counter from the festival organizers was, well, would you like to have a spot? And they did. A lot of businesses did that. They chose to do it. I think like a lot of people in Ontario and small towns, even large places as well, there's a bit of a labor shortage. So, to have both your brick and mortar, like for instance, we have a cafe that's right on the corner of the two main streets. And the owner there put, like you said, exactly that. They put a gelato and, bagel station and all this great stuff outside of their business, but they also had to staff their inside. So they didn't really double, but they certainly increased it by at least half the staff requirements. Good return on investment if they could find the staff. And I think that was maybe the challenge. But exactly what you said, going forward, I think a lot of those businesses saw the value. Alternatively to that too, as a festival organizer, trying to work well with businesses, I would suggest thinking about what kind of vendors are being placed in front of a business. We had an example where we have a business that sells soaps, essential oils, a lot of really great, interesting products, body products and whatnot. And one of the vendors that got placed in front of them sold exactly the same thing, but was not their business. And so it was it was a bit sensitive, a bit touchy, and it caused a little bit of, consternation between the art festival organizers and that business. And so maybe just a good consideration as you're setting these vendors up to say, how are you doing the mix of vendors and their location? Not a bad thing to have that, business there as part of the vendors, but maybe a little bit further down the street, a little bit separated to, disassociate the two.
I have a question for anybody, but Rob started this. What happens, because Marnie and I were talking about this yesterday, what happens if you have somebody, Marnie used the example of an Avon representative who's coming in as Avon, and somebody else is coming in with, let's say, soaps, handmade soaps, but they're selling Avon on the side and they have, they're trying to promote their Avon business as well. How do you manage something like that? How do you work with them around that? Because I'm sure I wouldn't be happy if I'm, selling a certain product and I have my competition, although you're not, but you are selling the same products. So that's for you, Rob, or anybody. How would you handle that?
I see Joanne waving her hand.
Joanne's waving
Port
her
Elgin.
hand.
But you'll have to take her off mute, dear.
Just a minute, Joanne. I can't hear you.
Joanne, you're on mute.
There we go.
Okay, there we go.
There we are.
We make all our vendors, plus our food vendors, list what they're selling. And quite often we'll say, sorry, you can't do hot dogs because King Hot Dogs is doing hot dogs. So you do your poutine and the Avons and the similar items. I separate. I never give it exclusivity though, only because that's a nightmare as well. But we do suggest that if I've got two Avons, I will tell one either to not come, or sell the other product and not bring her Avon products. So we do limit that and work at placing them appropriately.
Just out of curiosity too, and when Rob, you were talking about spacing and putting tables further apart, etc. Did you find that you had to say no to some vendors because you didn't have the space or the inventory to be able to place them? How did that work?
Yeah, like I said, it was a Chamber of Commerce event, so I wasn't involved in the organizing, but I definitely worked with them and talked about that impact. For them as an organizing committee, this is a big fundraiser, obviously, and so purchasing of booth locations brings them revenue to allow them to do other things, as we all have in our different events. And so spacing them certainly reduced probably the number of vendors, and obviously, reduce their revenue. So that was a challenge. And I think that what they needed to see is a return on, more interaction, more participation, better quality of festival versus trying to get more in there to get an increased revenue. Now that's hard to quantify, I guess. And I haven't participated in their after action, but I think it's interesting. We did expand it. That's the thing. So one main street was the main downtown street where they used to be all just lined up, and then it expanded to another side street and really grew and actually brought a lot more people around the town and get to experience more without all being jammed down that main route. So I think, having them separated was positive. It had an effect or an impact. How do you mitigate that impact? That's maybe yet to be seen, because I know the one organizer said, hey, this is great this year, but next year we're going to jam them closer together because this is our big revenue gaining, or revenue generating situation. So yeah, it's kind of that tension, I guess, of how to make that work.
Rob, if we had to do the same thing at Pumpkin Fest, and something I found which surprised me is that in this new reality, the airiness of the separation made the visitor much more comfortable, that they were happy they could move around and not feel crammed in, where that used to be our goal, was to reach capacity. Now it's like, give them some space. So it's a different world.
And it's like I said, it was a bit of a happy accident to do that. And we saw those open spaces being used. We had these kind of roaming musicians they could then kind of tuck in there and play some music for a half hour during the festival and then roam somewhere else. And like I said as well, the downtown businesses, suddenly you could walk between those vendors and go to a great shop that was right behind. And that's always been kind of the challenge as well. So yeah, it was an interesting accident. Now it's just a matter of whether we can do this as an enduring thing and just showing the value of doing it to the organizers. Kyle, did you have a question too? Sorry, I saw a hand up. I didn't know if that was from you.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to say as well, like, roaming entertainment is a great way to extend, especially when you're extending from a main street where populations might kind of tend to crowd. It's a great way of getting people to extend down side streets or other pathways. But I did also want to ask, for yourself or for anyone else on the call, if you are doing something like a street festival, if you find that when you're planning your festival footprint within what's a planned streetscape, while I was planning one, I brought up the idea of accessibility and being able to gain access to businesses through that, had to go up a curb. And when I spoke with a BIA or the city, they said, well, our streetscape's been replanned to be accessible with cutouts at the intersections. And I asked, well, what about when a festival footprint comes in and how people access the street changes, where they may, because of something happening at a main intersection, gets blocked, or if they have to go between vendors in order to gain access to a business, there aren't curb cutouts there. So I'm wondering if anyone has encountered this in planning their event. Because for myself, I know I was trying to get basically an inventory of temporary ramps that maybe the city could use for different events, so that there was different ways to access the curb. I wasn't successful at the time, but I'm wondering if if other folks have had solutions or encountered this at all.
So from our side, I think it's critical, and I think even like I've written a few grants, and you see that it talks about that. I mean, not just from a social responsibility from the town, but people are pushing for this and making sure that things are accessible. We actually had the local NDP candidate not walking around. He's in a wheelchair, and he was coming around, and we talked about accessibility, and I think he saw that how important that was. And having that space provides that opportunity to do temporary ramps. Probably a lot of towns can't actually just turn on a dime and create those accessible locations separate for their specific activity. But I think that's a really great point. And I'm going to take that away. I'm going to let the chamber know about that. I think that's really important.
So I have another question on accessibility, because we had a speaker on Tuesday Talks last year that talked about not only accessibility on the streets, but your website, your signage, your marketing materials. How do you address that? I know Marnie had something on that as well.
Yeah, it's something that most of us that are doing events in the province and working with municipalities specifically, there are expectations and regulations for accessibility at a venue, in your marketing, in your social media, so that we are providing the experience to all, that it is all inclusive. And even more so now, it is required that we ensure that our planning phase does address the AODA issues and requirements, that the physical site is inclusive, that people with mobility issues, sensory issues, that we do our best to plan, that we show that there is a plan in place and that'll be executed hopefully without flaws. I'm just wondering if anyone has encountered some challenges or some real great successes in working with the partners to facilitate this, because I think the mandate was for 2020 that municipal venues were accessible. And sometimes, an event will be held on municipal property, but even private property, private corporate property. So if you were renting a ballroom for an event, that it is as accessible or can provide accessibility access to it, for lack of better words. I'm just wondering if anyone has had that opportunity to address it with their own event. And how did you go about incorporating it to ensure, because the old, we've always done it this way, isn't that way anymore? To circle back to that, that great phrase.
Kelsey, did you have something?
I'll jump in with one. Oh, sorry, there we go. Kelsey,
No,
yes.
that's okay.
Go ahead, Kelsey.
Hi. Yeah, it's sort of just back to what Kyle and Rob were talking about. We have experience in Elora, which is a small old town with a very tight cross section downtown, not a lot of space, and some sort of old infrastructure and old businesses. So what a lot of businesses have done, even not just for events, but for regular year round, is there's like rubber, I think they're called threshold ramps. It's sort of a movable, temporary, but can be permanent rubber ramp that you can add pieces to get the correct rise that you need. Some of them use them to get into that step into their businesses off the sidewalk, but they're not that expensive. I think they're a couple $100. The BIA, I believe, worked with individual owners, the businesses, to get these ramps for them to ensure that all businesses in town are accessible. And that could easily work for a temporary event too, for a curb. So even if it's just a handful of them, it's something that's not going to break the bank and is really flexible and movable. So something to look into.
That's really good. I like that idea. I know with in Timmins, we have a mock committee, which translates to an organization that is made up of people that have mobility, visual, hearing, well, auditory challenges. And they've gone around to various sites throughout the community and identified issues that needed to be addressed and fixed as soon as possible. And I think back when there was funding for this as well. And it definitely was a benefit to have them at one of the venues where they identified even just the type of slope or grade of the pathway, divots that, the rest of us who have no issue getting around didn't consider. If you're trying to go across grassy terrain with a walker, how that can impact the experience and the safety of that visitor to your event. If you have something like that in your community, they're fantastic to work with, because it definitely opens your eyes to what the experience can be from the other end of things, where you're not as mobile as others. Kyle, you have your hand up.
I think Lisa had her hand up first.
Oh, sorry. Yep, Lisa, it blends in with your background.
No worries. I was just going to expand kind of on what you were saying, Marnie. So I work for municipality, so we do have access to accessibility and inclusion coordinators. So we do have, for our events, we work closely with her. She comes on site during some of our setup times, or we'll meet with her in advance and review what our site is. And she's been very helpful to give suggestions. We've had people from members from the advisory committee, accessibility advisory committee, come out on site as well and inspect. Sometimes they've just come out to an event on their own time and provided us feedback, which we've accepted. That's been very helpful. As a municipality, we do permit events on city property. We haven't made it mandatory, but we have offered that if possible, or have the accessibility coordinator go out and just kind of take a look and provide feedback if they're open to that. So that's been very helpful for us.
Fantastic. And Kyle?
I just wanted to add a couple of things that I tried in the past. One, there's a thing that's happening in theater called relaxed performances. It's great for people with sensory disorders, where there's no like lighting cues, things like that might be jarring for certain people. So I think it was a first of a kind for a busker festival, since there was a theater within the main street where our street closure was. We had some indoor performances. And what I found was that it actually made it easier to access for people who maybe couldn't be outside standing in heat, or maybe had other considerations as well, where a street performance might not be accessible for them. So it was just kind of a wonderful accident that in making something accessible for potentially one group, it actually made it easier to access for other groups as well. But it was, it worked out well that there was a theater within that group. And then another thing as well was I reached out to the province because they had accessibility training for volunteers that they developed for the Toronto 2015 Pan Am Games. And then they still had those slides available for free. So when I had reached out to them, they offered up their training deck so that we would be able to offer accessibility training, which appealed to a number of different groups. Again, people with sensory disorders, on how best to approach, being friendly and smiley and, really getting in someone's face may not be a the best way to interact with everyone. And I believe that resource is still available online.
That is awesome. I'd love to see that deck, because I know that in many of the events, we're seeing more and more participation. People are coming out, and it hasn't been addressed in a grand scale. So if that's available to event organizers, I think that is something that we could probably all take a look at and see how it could be implemented in each programming.
I'll jump in quickly. I actually worked for the Pan Am Games and did that training. I also did the very similar training when I worked with the Olympics. But I wanted to ask quickly, we had been kind of throwing around the idea of a quiet night with our midway, where we have a night at the very beginning where all the lights are turned off, the noises are turned off, the sounds are turned off, where kids who couldn't be in that kind of sort of environment with all those lights and bells and whistles and stuff going off, they could come for a couple hours, do some rides, play some games, that sort of thing. Has anybody ever done that sort of thing with their midway?
I haven't seen it happen, but I think that's an awesome idea. I just want to add that in there.
That would be very interesting to see. That has such a amazing aspect to an event that I think that would attract a lot of people to it. That's very inclusive. I like that thinking.
Yeah, we're also changing what we call our moms and tots room, which is normally just a room that you can go and change kids in and have breastfeeding or quiet time or whatever. We're changing that to more of a quiet, inclusive room where you can go, there'll be chairs, a larger change table for those who may not be baby size but still need to have access to changing. So more of I want to say like a therapy bed type of thing for anybody in a wheelchair who needs to have changing or cleaning or freshening, and a quiet area. So it's not just for changing. You can go let your kid quiet down in this area, read a book or something to settle before going back out.
There's lots of great information, Michelle, in the chat too. So take a look at that, where they've heard quiet zones at Santa parades and have a sensory day or afternoon as part of their programming. So in the US. So, I will remind you, Michelle, if you're a member of FEOs, you're also a member of IFEA, where there's a lot of events in the US down there. So you might be able to reach out to them to see if they have, or if they're doing anything like that. And I can put you on to those people. So
that would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome, Michelle. Tina.
This one isn't as easy for other festivals and events, but maybe more working with your municipalities or parks. One thing we were just talking about in one of our event meetings was the planning when obviously a lot of our venue space is all parkways, is having the curbs cut in certain areas to make it more accessible. And also it assists with just the load in and load out. But those areas that are most, usually there's a nice, pavement area, but to get to that area, there's a curb or something. So just having that, long-term plan of being able to cut those curbs, working with your municipality or parks, right?
Thanks, Tina. It's a great idea, if you don't already do it.
Sorry, Deb, I can't
Oh, am I talking too low? Am I talking too low? I'm trying not to. Okay, so it's a great idea if you're not already doing it. So is there any, we have about 5 minutes left. Is there anything that you want to touch on? We didn't talk about waste management that we were going to, but I mean, we covered a lot of good information. So Michelle, your hand is still up. I'm assuming you're done. unless you have another question. Okay. Thanks. Nothing else? Any last words, Marnie?
Yes, thank you for your patience with me as I keep using the word awesome, but I am so incredibly inspired by this group and what's been shared today. I definitely need to broaden my vocabulary, but thank you for participating and contributing. And even if you're listening in, I'm hoping that there's some takeaways, and if there's any questions that you come up with, or something that you weren't quite comfortable sharing or asking in the group, please reach out to Debbie or myself, and we can get answers for you. You are experts in what you're doing, and there are many more out there. So the information is there to be shared, so that we all have the opportunity to host these great events that everyone is participating in and supporting in their various roles. So again, thank you today for participating and letting us know your burning questions and the information that you have.
Wonderful. So just as a quick reminder too, that our next Tuesday Festivals Helping Festivals is on June 7th. And the subject is marketing. So, and we'll see where that takes us. This has been so informative. Thank you so much for your sharing. If there's somebody you want to reach out to and you don't have their information, we have their information, as long as you're all okay with me sharing your email addresses with participants here. I'm more than willing to do that. And does anybody else have anything else to say? Great. Thanks, everyone. It's been a great hour. Really appreciate your input, your feedback, and look forward to seeing you in June. I can't believe it's going to be June. All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everybody.